Hey team, this is TWE TV here and bringing you guys another YouTube video. So we're going to be going into three-stage entry model. So ideally the market is basically broken into three stages, accumulation, manipulation, and distribution, or what's better known is liquidity phase, sweep, then run on liquidity. You're probably asking yourself, how can I determine liquidity? So there's so many different ways, and the mechanics of it, it's very basic, like equal highs, equal lows, trending markets, swing highs, swing lows. And what I mean by trending markets is there's no pullback, so that will signify liquidity here and there. But yeah, so that's one way of doing it. And then, there's another way, which is, taking a step further and looking at the previous session, right? Seeing like maybe an Asian session and then seeing the next session, it sweeps it, right? So it's breaking a high or low of it. Well, in this case, on the one above, it sweeps the bottom one first. So it would sweep the buyers, right? And then it would sweep the sellers. The reason for it is when it sweeps, in this case, it's trying to distribute to the downside. It wants to sweep the buyers first because it wants to create less resistance for that move down. And same thing with this one on the bottom here. So it's sweeping the sellers first, right? And then it goes and sweeps the buyers. And the main reason for that is so that it can have less resistance when it decides to run to the upside, if that kind of makes sense for everybody. So the whole idea of this is the institutions, they want to mainly focus on which side of the liquidity will give the most resistance. Meaning, if let's say it's going to be a seller's market, right? The best thing to do first would be to manipulate or sweep the buyers, because now that's less resistance for the market to drop. Now, to maximize their profits, they would need to, let's say in the, the top diagram here, it looks like they would then have to, obviously sweep the sellers, right, on the high side. And the main reason why is if they can kick out as many sellers as possible, then that allows them to get more shares, put in more orders, have a higher volume, make more money. That's the whole idea of it. And then obviously you're going to have order flow start to, form like on the lower time frame here. That's just re-entry points for them. That's the whole point of figuring out supply and demand. Supply and demand is you're trying to figure out what is the point of entry, right? The little range that these institutions are entering on. That's the whole point. That's what we're trying to find, right? Now, when this happens, the same thing on the diagram below. They want to sweep the sellers first because they want a buying opportunity. So what they'll do is that they'll sweep the sellers first, creates less resistance for them, and then they'll sweep the buyers, right? And now when they do that, now that creates more volume, more space for them to submit their orders, and obviously submit it where there's not as much volume and, such a chaotic market for them, and they can position themselves, whichever way that they would like to. That's the whole idea behind this. Now, once this is all completed, that's where the next phase, distribution / run on liquidity, then happens. This is when the institutions are now laying out their orders. Now, the next one is Smart Money Concepts breakdown. All right, so we have a bullish push to the upside, right? Now that creates a higher time frame POI. We got liquidity forming on the outside and on the inside of the market. That's the accumulation, right? That's what I was talking about. Then you have the manipulation. So now it's sweeping liquidity, right? And this is also where we're starting to see where it's slowly seeping into the distribution phase, which we're trying to test out who's in control. It already tapped into the 15-minute or higher time frame POI, but now it's hitting a 1-minute supply. It's reacting to it. Beautiful. It reacts to it. That's exactly what we want to see. So we want to see it drop, right? And then it gets swept immediately afterwards. So it's sweeping liquidity on both sides, right? So that's the whole manipulation phase in a nutshell. Then from all of that, it creates another lower time frame, demand that we can possibly take a trade off of, and same thing with the other side here, where we have liquidity forming on both sides, the inside and outside of the market, right? That's the accumulation phase. Then we have the manipulation phase. We got 1 minute or lower time frame supply forming, reacts to it, blows through it, creates a lower time frame demand. We could take a trade off of it. Simple as that. Now let's hop onto the live market. So what I have here is NAS 100. I feel like the best thing to do right now is hop on the higher time frame. We're on the 15-minute right now. We have what's called a transaction, and we have a whole liquidity phase here. So we have equal highs, and we also have some equal lows here. Now, with that being said, we have multiple points here that, I'm circling out here that we need to focus on, because that right there is where there's going to be a lot of sellers, right, entering the market. That's the environment that I keep telling everyone about, that they manufacture in the market. Now that we identified our liquidity, let's take a really good look at the transaction that we have here. Well, this is a 15-minute transaction. You're probably asking, what is a transaction? Like I've mentioned in my previous videos, it's basically just to figure out who's in control, if it's either supply or demand. So in this case, we have a demand that fails, but we know it's a demand because we had a reaction to it, right? And then after the reaction, it then sweeps it, right? And from that, it creates a supply that we then can obviously use as a part of our confluence to slowly narrow things down. So yeah, so now we have liquidity on both sides. It sweeps the sellers, right? So it's making it really quick here. Now, once we do that, we hop into a lower time frame. Now we have a demand here. It definitely reacts really well to that higher time frame POI, taps into it, slowly creates like a 1 minute supply. We also have a demand there. So I ideally want to see that demand have a good reaction, which that's exactly what it's doing right now. And it's slowly pulling into that supply that we had there. So I want to mark out how we have a reaction on both sides. Okay, now it's slowly creating somewhat of order flow. We got that lower time frame 1 minute demand slowly forming here. I ideally want to see this 1 minute supply have a reaction and actually follow through. So I want to see this 1 minute supply, now that it's really tapping in aggressively into this POI. It sweeps it. Okay, beautiful. It's sweeping liquidity. So it's creating liquidity and sweeping liquidity. That's what we want to see. I also want to highlight the reaction we had on this demand. And ideally, I want to see this create a reaction. So we have another reaction here. So in a nutshell, you could kind of look at it as the market's kind of pulling into it, reacting to it, pulling back, and then blowing through it, right? It creates a fair value gap / 1 minute demand, a supply to take a trade off of. Notice it pulls into this 1 minute demand again. It's tapping into this fair value gap. It's like a magnet to the market. That's how you should look at it. That's ideally a magnet. And what I always tell all my students is, if you have a fair value gap and a supply or demand right next to it, it's a very good thing. Now, how you may want to enter it, that's going to be up to your discretion. I always tell people, it really just depends. If you want to take both on, that's up to you. If you want to narrow it down, that's up to you as well. But then that all falls on your stop loss, what broker you have. I always tell people, it's better to just give yourself some space. There's nothing wrong with that. So let's look for a little bit more liquidity to form. And that's exactly what it's slowly starting here. And I also want to see this 1 minute demand fail as well. So we got that liquidity forming. Beautiful. Now it sweeps it, taps right into it, really aggressive. That's exactly what we want to see in this market. The biggest thing to take from this is it just went through all the phases. It went through the liquidity phase, the accumulation, right? So it's generating liquidity, then sweeping liquidity. Then it went through the manipulation phase, right? So it's now really sweeping both sides, right? Taking away the resistance, right? Now, once it's tapping into our zone, and this one in particular, it's tapping into our 1 minute supply that's sitting right next to the fair value gap. Now, this is the third and final stage of the market where the liquidity has been swept, the manipulation happened. So now we're going into the distribution / run on liquidity phase, where basically it's just where the institutions are flushing their orders into the market and targeting that liquidity that we have resting below here, or, vice versa, if let's say it's a buying situation. But I hope this video has been informative to everybody and, kind of opens your eyes. Maybe you learned something new today, or if you just need a little help, our Discord is in my bio. We also have the new Elite Bootcamp. We're starting enrollment again. We also have a ginormous community of educational traders and traders like yourself that, are new, or maybe they're trying to learn something, or maybe they're new to smart money concept. Whichever you need, we're here to help. All my links are in my bio. And as always, guys, stay profitable.